Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Invocable Podcast. Hey, I just wanted to jump on real quick, and I want to talk about something. It's not really a formal one. This is just something I want to bring up. And even if nobody catches this right now, it's fine. I want to talk about Norman Public Schools for a second, and the walkout that was supposed to happen today. Now, it was fainted, and it appears that it may not have happened. But I want to underscore something. This isn't the first walkout that's happened at Norman Public Schools. Even if it didn't happen, there's been others. If you remember, not long ago, when the abortion issue came down from the Supreme Court when it was leaked, there was a walkout staged by Norman Public School students. Okay? And what I want to underscore here, because we see the same thing attempting to happen today, but it doesn't appear to materialize. And I think that's interesting. But I want you to understand that the teachers and the administrators who are pushing this agenda in our schools, Norman, Oklahoma is the center of this. Why? Because of its proximity to the University of Oklahoma. But I think it's very interesting. That politicians and other activists in the state seem to go out of their way to avoid talking about Norman, even when the Summer Bramier thing was going on. And I think that teacher issue was a big issue, obviously. But we must understand that the biggest issue is what's happening to the kids. So I'm going to give you just a little primer on what this is and why. For starters, the reason why it's the epicenter, the reason why Norman, Oklahoma is the epicenter, is because of its proximity to the University of Oklahoma. The reason why Stillwater is probably the other epicenter is because of its proximity to the University of Oklahoma State University. So, But I'm very concerned about Norman specifically, because all I hear is praise for Norman Public Schools outside of the Summer Bramier issue, when I have presented proof with the very words and mouth of the superintendent of Norman Public Schools that Norman is the example. What they have done very well is hide it. And I think that's a little bit because I've been on their butt so much, and so have some other parents here in Norman who are connected with me. But Stephanie Williams, who was the DEI director and is now the director of student services, spent the last 2 years hiring people based upon their acceptance or not of this ideology. The superintendent said she was going to do that. The reason why that there were books in Norman Public School Library that represent inclusiveness that we are all calling pornography is because she had oversight over that, per Nick, the superintendent. And what you see here is, what we saw back during the abortion issue, is teachers training kids to be activists and them staging political activist events that make news by walking out of class organized on the behest of their teachers and what they believe politically. Why do they do that? Because peer pressure is the strongest force on the planet. And there is a concerted effort in Norman specifically, because of its proximity to OU, which we just barely talk about anymore, by the way, which none of the politicians have done anything about at all. But they're teaching these kids how to be activists, and they do that as a moral issue. They do that in the way you would teach your kid, if you're a Christian, to uphold the teachings of Christ. They do that. DEI diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory, critical gender theory, queer theory, radical gender ideology, if you want to call it, Chris Rufo uses it. It instills a moral center or a moral framework in the way that a religion does. And how do they make their tithe? How do they appease? Right? How do they appease? They promote political objectives. They break down everybody by race, color, creed, and then however many hundreds of genders they can create in order to bifurcate your child's personality, in order to replace it with a political personality. That way, if you disagree with your child's politics at any point, they see it at that point, they train them using social emotional learning to treat that as an attack on their personhood. You see what I'm saying? They replace your child's individual personality with a political personality. And that any attack on it is an attack on their person. And that's why you see students now, anytime that there's an issue that falls along the fault line, especially in Norman. Haven't seen any other walkouts, have you? Especially in Norman. That's why you see them activating. And make no mistake, I don't care. I would bet every dollar I have, which isn't many, that teachers, behind the scenes, counselors, administrators, were tacitly encouraging this, telling them how strong they were for standing up for this. But remember what the issue is. The issue is whether biological boys can be in the bathroom and or locker room with girls, biological girls. But your students are imbibing this so much that 10, 15 years from now, this will be the standard moral ideology. And nobody's paying attention to this in Norman. Nobody's paying attention to, I really do, the focus on the books is a good thing, okay? And because we need to get those out. But they're just a symptom of a larger, more in-depth problem. And that problem lies in the administrations and the outside companies these administrations bring in to serve as structures for the new system within their schools. And Norman Public Schools is the epicenter of this. But all I hear is praise about their new aerospace program. And because of its proximity to OU, which is the sacred cash cow, despite the fact that they can't win a football game to save their life. Interesting. Because of that proximity, they didn't want the Summer Wamier fight. I know that. And it getting as big as it did was really bothersome. And the way that Norman Public Schools covered up what happened there by literally lying about many different details is telling. And the way that they have, since I started calling out DEI in Norman Public Schools, both behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, switched around their whole office. They don't have a DEI office anymore. They have a student services director who was their DEI director and is doing all the same stuff, but they've hid it underground. And it's actually more pernicious now. But because of this proximity to OU, they're teaching kids to be racist. They're teaching kids to bifurcate their personalities in such a way that it may lead them to surgically altering their body or chemically altering their body way before they should ever begin to make such a decision. And they do that by saying everyone if you want to be a moral good person, just the way if you were a Christian, if you want to be a good Christian, if you want to be a good Muslim, if you want to be a good Buddhist, you've got to act and believe these specific things and fight for these specific things and advocate for these specific things. It's a doctrine. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a hack of the separation of church and state because it is a secular, moralistic-based religion. And it's been implanted in schools, public, private, in businesses, public, private, in government, public, and private. And I just go watch my live stream from earlier today. It may be the most important thing that nobody's talking about, where I detail for you how the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, the Oklahoma Department, has endorsed, can't define the word woman, can't define the word man, and has endorsed the term genderqueer, and is pushing for transition-aged youth. And nobody's talking about it. And I said, if you elect Joy Hoffmeister and Jenna Nelson, that is going to be further embedded because they're spending $35 million of ARPA money, surprise, of ARPA money for double the amount of ASCA-trained counselors that are trained by that institution, the American School Counselors Association, to embed radical gender ideology and critical race theory and all of these tenets into a student while they're in their sphere of influence. And I'm sorry. We've been talking about the books for a long time. Can we get past the surface level now? We've got people's attention. Can we actually point the problem, get a solution towards the actual root of the problem, or are we ignoring it for some reason? That's my question. Because the root of the problem, it lies in the administration. The root of the problem lies in these, not just the teachers' unions. Because the DEI and that apparatus and that ideology and the companies they bring in to facilitate this, which are independent of teacher unions. Teacher unions bad. Okay, great. We agree. But this is different. They have whole structures that are designed to remake your school. And Norman Public Schools is the furthest along. It makes the least amount of waves, but that's because it's had people like me watching it since the day it started. And pointing out all the areas and just sliding it under the radar. And I will be attacked. I've been discredited, or all these things, even by Republicans, even by conservatives, because I often point the light where nobody wants it to go, because nobody wants to take responsibility. They're afraid they will be held responsible for what's happened. I don't care who's responsible. Fix it. And in order to fix it, you have to point it at the administration. HB 1775 completely overlooks the actual root of the problem. Because it removes all extracurricular. It can't hold administrators accountable. It can hold the school accountable, to hold the teacher accountable, but it can't really hold the administrators accountable, who are making all the hiring decisions, who are ultimately approving all of the materials that go into schools that are going to make big news. And shout out to Riley Flax is going on Jason to Waters World tonight for highlighting that. But I think that's a 2-month-old issue. What are we going to do about it? And it can't just be school choice. I'm not going to have that argument right now. It won't fix, because the private schools are just as bad. The private schools have the same influences and the same stacked incentives towards accepting this ideology. And if we don't do something about it, it will never get done. If we don't admit to ourselves what the actual problem is and fix it, if we want to, and focus on it, which is the administrative issue, which is the University of Oklahoma, directly. Because every professional development that comes from that school, that gets transplanted all across, every student, every administrator that comes from their school of education, is going to teach this same thing, whether they're in a private school or a public school. And they don't need curriculum to do it, if you haven't figured that out yet. They don't need curriculum to do it. Tyler Wren said that. He said he was too overt and now he's gone covert. Right? They don't need curriculum. This is a teacher pipeline problem. This is an administrator pipeline problem. And the longer you ignore where the pipeline begins, which is the university, the more likely you are to lose. Because if they get your student, your kid, your child, to believe in a different religion, one that demands that they separate from you in order to be good because you have different beliefs than them, why do you think they're always talking about the family you have or the family you choose? Because they want your child, if you believe differently from this ideology, to be removed from your family in a very practical, political way. That's the goal. And they're doing that through mental health, through social emotional learning, by retraining the way that your child thinks on a daily basis with everything that is presented to them. That's what I've been saying since the beginning, that very little people have. They all want the issue, but they don't want to deal with the problem. Stephanie Williams, in her teacher training, in 2021 for DEI, her Teach for Equity teacher training, said, equity is not an option. And it must be embedded in everything you do, not in addition to. That sounds like, okay, take the word equity out and put the word Christianity or Islam, or name your belief system. And the tithe is at the ballot box. And the teachers see this as a great commission. That's why they see it as a moral good. They're willing to take whatever pay. As long as they, like Summer Bwamia said, they can teach what they believe as being good, how to be a good person. Your churches have been usurped by your schools. And it's teaching a different ideology. And that's why you see kids on any number of these hot button political issues storming out, but only for one side of the issue. Because the peer pressure only goes in one way, and the peer pressure comes from the top down and the middle out. Because to be seen as anything right of Mao is to be an apostate. It's to be a bad person. It's to be a racist. It's to be a homophobe. It's to be a transphobe. All of these pejoratives that they throw out that don't have any of the original meaning to them anymore get thrown at your kid in high school. Just think back about high school for a second. Think about middle school. Think about how impressionable you were. Think about how you were worried so much about how everyone thinks of you. Think about the things you might have done because you wouldn't have normally done, but you did because you wanted people to think you were good or cool or be in the group. Now apply what's happening to that mentality. What does that equal? Teacher-induced, counselor-induced, administrator-induced walkouts over leftist political issues that boil down to whether or not a person, a boy, a biological boy, can be in a room with a girl where she's taking off her clothes. in school. So this is, I didn't want this to be very long, but I just had to highlight this. Because you can talk about all the parents going and talk to school board members. We can have all of that. That's great. Keep doing that. Okay? I'm not discounting any of that. But at a certain point, because this has been going on for 2 years now, folks. The first time I talked to officials about this was in October of 2020. Back when defund the police was happening. And I told them then, this is just the beginning. What I'm telling you is we have to now move to the actual fixing of the problem. Because we think, I thought, well, maybe if they run and they win election and they use these as issues, they'll actually fix the problem. I'm not as hopeful, because guess what comes after this election? Another one. And before that comes a nice big school choice fight where you've got to have a lot of fire to push people one direction or the other. And I don't care about that issue right now. It's not the fix, because the majority of kids are still going to go to public school for the next foreseeable 10, 15 years. They will. School choice or not. And this is a numbers game. The left is always talking about democracy. And they're trying to raise the stature of a child. I guarantee you in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a concerted effort for 16-year-olds to have the vote. Watch. They will. Because they're trying to raise that to the level of being a mature adult. Because they know that they're more impressionable at that time. They can be manipulated easier. And it will only get easier as this continues down the systemic process, through schools, through teachers, through all of these, through the whole system. They are doing exactly what it is they claim to be stopping. When they talk about systemic racism, they're building a systemically discriminatory process within every part of the school. Because as Stephanie Williams said in her 2021 Teach for Equity teacher training, equity means that some students will get more than others. And that's to be done based upon identity. So I really hope that people take notice every time you see a large group of students in K through 12 schools get activated, and look at who's activating them. And notice that it's always only one direction. Okay? That's all I've got. Go watch my live stream from earlier today about the Oklahoma. I'm just going to show you, because about the Oklahoma mental health and substance abuse. This is a huge story that nobody's paying attention to. And I think that's probably political. But if it were anyone but me, I think, maybe, there would be lots more people talking about this issue. Because the mental health and substance abuse, the department here in Oklahoma, if you look, are defining woman and man like this. A person who has a male, masculine gender identity. And they're using the term genderqueer. This is what they're teaching, what they call transition-aged youth. And just so you want to see the direct connection to schools, it's right here from Joy Hoffmeister. Democratic candidates for governor, Joy Hoffmeister, and state superintendent candidate, Jenna Nelson, have openly and consistently called for an expansion of behavioral and mental health positions in Oklahoma public schools. And all in active participation with this department. And she says it right here. She quotes ASCA, which is the American School Counselors Association, and they have a direct, just go, I'll put in here if y'all want to see it. But this is why Joy and Jenna cannot be elected, because they will expand this. Governor Stitt, this is his department, but it's been working in concert with Joy for 8 years. And so the only chance of this being stopped is if he gets reelected. And I just want to be clear about that. And you should know about this so you can know what to look for when he is reelected. That's why I'm bringing it out now. Because once the election happens, nobody's paying attention anymore. And they know it. Whoever the proverbial they is. So, that's all I've got. If you like what I'm bringing you, like, subscribe, share the channel, hit the bell. I appreciate you watching, and even those who might be watching that don't agree with me. What I can tell you this is that my intentions are pure, and I believe I'm doing the right thing, and I think I've presented evidence to show that. And most often what I do is not popular on either side of the spectrum. Which my father used to tell me, that's when you know you're doing something right. Parse my information. Prove me wrong. But don't stop looking after the election. Look harder. Go vote for Governor Stitt. Go vote for Ryan Walters. Go vote for anybody else you believe in that will end this. But don't stop after the job is done. Because everybody's tired after an election. That's when you need to actually be paying attention. I'll help you do that. So, all right, guys, thank you very much. Talk to you later.